Michelle Goodloe is a licensed clinical social worker and an experienced project manager, dedicated to helping others develop healthy relationships with themselves and with others. With a professional background in providing clinical interventions, compassion-based services, and statewide advocacy for people impacted by domestic violence, child abuse, and stress-related conflict, the focus of Michelle's career has been to develop and institute accessible and resourceful avenues of support through her agencies, The Essence of Healing LLC and gmichelle.com. Michelle is the owner and psychotherapist with The Essence of Healing LLC, a private therapeutic practice based in Atlanta, Georgia. The Essence of Healing LLC provides individual and couples psychotherapy to adult residents in the states of Georgia and Illinois. She is also the creator of the wellness resource website, gmichelle.com, which offers busy, caring professionals the opportunity to make self-care a practical part of their lives. Michelle facilitates interactive workshops for nonprofit and private organizations that experience challenges and addressing self-care, compassion fatigue, and professional burnout. Michelle, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Y'all, can we just take a moment and just like inhale together and exhale together? I mean, what an incredible summit. It is my absolute pleasure to add my 2 cents in terms of why our care is so incredibly important, why self-care for Black mothers is incredibly important. I'm so excited to offer not just some woo-woo, can we keep it real? Okay, not just some woo-woo ideas on how to take care of yourself, but some very practical self-care strategies and ideas so that you can show up and do the things that are most important to you. So let's jump right in. I specifically wanted to call this space that we're holding at the end of this incredible summit, Creating Space to Take Care of You. I know y'all have seen all of the messages about self-care on social media and different platforms. And sometimes self-care feels so impractical to Black mothers. It feels like something you have to attain or something else to add on your to-do list. So I want this space to be a space where we really talk about and validate the experience that Black women and Black mothers have in trying to practice self-care. And again, offer some practical strategies, tips, ideas, so that you can leave with at least one idea of how to create that space to take care of you. Let's talk about it a little bit more with the next slide. We're going to talk about why self-care is essential for us, which is going to be some review, okay? I know there's a lot of things that we've discussed today. And instead of really focusing on the really micro components, we're going to talk about some macro components. And then we're going to also dive into how to actually begin your self-care practice or how to commit to it, because I know there's a lot of things that get in between the care of ourselves and actually doing it. And we're going to close with some questions. If you have questions about self-care, I hope I can do my best in answering some of those questions. So let's talk about the actual definition of self-care on the next slide. I like to break down self-care. I'm not particularly attached to any particular definition, but these are the ones that I feel best talking about. Self-care is doing what you need to do to show up as your best self, okay? Self-care is doing what you need to do to show up as your best self. And I love to say, if that question comes up for you, if you're like, well, who is my best self? That is a wonderful place to start. Thinking about what habits, actions, behaviors, boundaries do you need to set, okay, to show up as your best self? So that's the big umbrella term for self-care. If we were to narrow it down a little bit more, a self-care practice, other words for practice, routine, plan, schedule, agenda. My favorite word is practice because it's not just a noun, it's a verb. And emphasizes that we have to try and do this self-care thing over and over again. We will not be doing it perfectly, but we can progress and practice. So a self-care practice is a routine act of identifying and addressing your needs on a regular basis. So for a self-care practice to be effective, it needs to be done on a regular basis. I tell folks, especially moms, especially Black moms, okay, practicing self-care every once in a while is just not gonna do it. It's not gonna cut it. Okay, I'm gonna keep it very, very, very transparent today. It needs to be done regularly, and it helps to start somewhere, definitely, when it comes to practicing self-care. And those two parts of the practice are also very important because we are ever growing and ever changing. We want to make sure we're identifying what our needs are because some of your needs that you had 10 years ago may be different than the needs you have today, right? So you want to identify your needs so that your self-care practice is reflective of where you are today. And then you want to address those needs. And I know somebody's looking at me like, Michelle, of course we do. But you know, it's important to say that. You want to address those needs after you identify them on a regular basis, and you want to practice doing that. So there's the big umbrella term of what self-care is, and then we narrow it down into a self-care practice. Let's look at some of the major things that very specifically Black women and Black mothers have to go through when we think about things that are impacting our ability to practice self-care. On that next slide. Take a second, if you have a journal with you, a notebook with you, because I know there's been some good notes taken during this incredible summit. And we won't spend a ton of time on this, but I want you to write this down. I love this quote by Maya Angelou. If women take care of their health, they become their own best friend. I talk about compassion a lot in the work that I do, and I kind of want to break that word down and bring it back to this definition, this quote. Compassion is noticing someone, an entity, a group suffering and wanting to do something about it. So I like to say self-compassion is recognizing when you're going through something, when you're experiencing difficulty, when things feel rough and not perfect, that you are pouring into yourself and wanting to do something about the suffering you're experiencing. In a lot of ways, like being your own best friend. That's another way to look at self-care and self-compassion. You're taking care of yourself because you recognize you're going through something. You're going through a lot. You're trying your best to take care of your kids. So here are some ideas to stick with you. First, just describe, I like to say 3 of your self-care needs. Again, going back to the definition, what do you need to do to show up as your best self? What are 3 things, activities, habits, routines, behaviors, boundaries do you need to show up as your best self? What's come up today, just even in the summit? That amazing panel, okay? What were some of the needs that you thought about for yourself? Another way to look at it, what has been missing from your self-care lately? What's been missing? And there's a lot of different ways to look at self-care. If I can list a few, they've got your physical self-care, your spiritual self-care, your social self-care, right? Your emotional self-care. How are you taking care of your personal relationship with yourself? So there's a lot of different ways to recognize and take care of your own needs. There's a lot of different ways. So think about what's been missing from your self-care lately. Those are 2 sticking points we might come back to. Let's go to the next slide. It's no secret that there are a lot of things that Black women are facing. And here are just a few things that we want to list together and recognize because as we've been talking about throughout this summit, there are very specific things that Black women are burdened with, are carrying, pressure to do, that have a lot to do with who we are and our identity. One of the most important is our repeated exposure to systemic oppression, injustice, and racism. Repeated exposure, right? We don't get a chance to take a break. And that's part of that privilege that people who are not us experience, right? That has a very strong impact on our emotional health, our physical health, right? When we are repeatedly exposed to, victimized, witnessing oppression, that has an impact on who we are and how we show up. Similarly, the stress of not only being Black people, but people who are female, people who are women, that intersectionality of racism and sexism also has an impact on how we show up every day. It has an impact on what we experience, on what we're going through, on how we raise our children, right? In adding to that, sometimes finding the space to be our authentic selves and the pressure to assimilate also can cause a lot of stress when trying to take care of yourself. There are a number, I mean, I really appreciate the discussion that was had in the panel of just how motherhood in a lot of different frameworks is seen from a white perspective. And our identity in terms of motherhood, it doesn't fit in there. And so we don't have, a lot of Black moms do not have opportunities to be their authentic selves, to talk about things that are just special to us because it's not deemed as one thing or another. And that pressure to assimilate is exhausting. And I'll throw this out there too. Sometimes self-care is just finding spaces to be your authentic self. And when I say your authentic self, it's the self that doesn't have to put on a show, that doesn't have to perform, that can truly, I mean, I feel a lot of stress here in my body. So when I know I'm in a space where I'm being appreciated authentically, I know my shoulders drop. You know, I feel less tense. I'm more relaxed. I'm not overthinking. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that in itself is an important self-care practice for Black women and Black moms, having space to be authentic. And then, of course, we know this, but it's important to say it out loud to each other, the history of dehumanization and disrespect of Black women and Black mothers. We're still in the process of advocating and recovering from, but there's still a long way to go, and we all know that. It's important for us to highlight these things and to take care of each other. I loved that discussion in the panel. We are a community. Virtually, we are here, we are connecting. I hear the mm-hms and the yes. I hear all of that, okay? I know y'all are here with me. But that has an impact on us. And again, I heard the panelists talk about this at length, which was amazing. The generational trauma, the historical trauma, you know, the interpersonal trauma that we are recovering from generations, it still has an impact on us today. And I only share these pieces to make sure that we are all on the same page, that we're not just focused on bubble baths and making tea, okay? Y'all know what I'm talking about when it comes to self-care. We're talking about recovery and healing from years, from centuries of dehumanization, right? So when we're talking about self-care, we're talking about how do we show up as our healthiest selves, the versions of ourselves we feel the most proud of. And when it comes to parenting, the types of parents we want to be in terms of interrupting these cycles. It's a lot. It's a lot. So let's look at the next slide together. This is the best time. If you have your journal or a notebook, I strongly recommend writing these practices down that we're going to go over today. So let's break it down. When you're thinking about creating a self-care practice where you're identifying and addressing your needs on a regular basis, I want you to think about these three things. The first thing I want you to think about is, what is one practice that helps you feel less tense, less overwhelmed, and less exhausted? Okay? Because I know somebody is like, okay, that sounds great, Michelle, but where should I start with practices? I want you to start here. What is one practice? Not 3, not 10, not a dozen. Come back with me. Just one. What's one practice that can help alleviate what I like to call some of these heavy feelings? Tension, stress, exhaustion, overwhelm. Is there one practice? I know for myself, getting some type of physical movement, and I like to give myself plenty of space and flexibility, some type of physical movement so I can release the tension that's held within my body, because my body holds a lot. Oh, my body is working so hard. Anybody else? Come on now. So I like to get a little bit of physical movement. If it's going for a walk, if it's doing a quick 5-minute video on YouTube, if it's just stretching in between the things and the meetings and the sessions, some type of physical movement. And I like to embody that, okay, I'm releasing the tension when I'm moving my body. Intentionality with that piece. That's what works for me. What works for you? That's one thing to consider. The second question, what is one practice that helps you feel more calm, balanced, recharged? What's one practice that gets you closer to the lighter feelings? We got heavy feelings, okay? The ones that weigh a lot, that feel a lot. But then we have our lighter feelings. What gets you closer to calm, balance, feeling recharged, restored, more joyful, more relaxed? For me, it has been journaling, especially as sheltering in place and dealing with everything that we've dealt with. Having some space to just write down what's going on with me, because if I don't check on me, who gonna do it? Okay, I can always depend on myself to check in. And y'all, I keep it really simple with journal prompts. I will literally ask myself, Michelle, how are you doing? Michelle, how is your body doing? Michelle, what are you feeling today? If I know something's not going right within my body, I will ask myself, Michelle, what is wrong? What's wrong? In a way that's caring and kind to myself, because I've got to check in on me. I've got to check in on me. One of my favorite affirmations that I will say to myself, I am too important to not take care of me. That's just facts. I'm just too important. I've got to prioritize what's important to me because I hold a lot of value. I am just that special. You know what I'm saying? And I say that so specifically because I know that there's a lot of rhetoric around how self-care is selfish or how self-care is self-centered, especially for Black women. And so we breaking that all up today. No, we're releasing the strong Black woman narrative. We letting that go too. No, I'm a Black woman that has all the feelings. Sometimes I feel strong and sometimes I don't. And I'm okay with that. Okay, we're accepting our humanness, you know. So I check in with myself. I can keep it simple. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It's another misconception that is very connected to mainstream audiences, white audiences, that self-care must be some type of expensive, very time extensive set of ways of caring for yourself. It doesn't have to be. And if it's been really tough for you to practice self-care, if it's tough to squeeze it in, just start somewhere. Just start somewhere. Take 2 to 5 minutes a day to do something intentionally, and then practice doing that repeatedly. Self-care must be practical to your life, your schedule, the things that you have to do. So again, what's one practice that helps you feel less tense, less overwhelmed, less stressed? What's one practice that helps you feel calm, balanced, recharged, right? The final piece is key, a major key, if you will. How can you mindfully use these practices on a regular basis? I love to use this method with my clients, so I'm gonna share it with y'all. Y'all remember when we were in school, you know, and there used to be a fire drill. You had to practice for if a fire happened, right? You heard the fire alarm. Everybody had to get up and line up. Everybody goes outside until it's the right time to go back in. We were practicing for if a crisis occurred. Kids were practicing. We were practicing because we was kids. We survived childhood, right? I like to say this is an incredible approach to have just for the care of yourself, a fire drill approach. If a crisis does happen, you're already practicing these self-care habits, so you'll be prepared to manage it in the best way you know how. We can't control everything, but if you're doing your self-care practice routinely, if you're adding some physical movement in a couple times a week, if you're making sure to start your day with a journal prompt, if you're trying your best to create a schedule that works for you. You know what I'm saying? If you're maintaining boundaries with people you need to maintain boundaries with, all of this has meaning and purpose. And when life comes at us, and it'll come at us fast, you'll have these practices ready to go to help you feel that calmness that you need, to help you feel less tense. So it's really important to figure out some of these pieces. And of course, there's a lot of intricacies in the way that you take care of yourself, but I also want to recognize how that can feel really overwhelming. So again, just start somewhere. Start with a practice that helps you feel less of the heavy feelings and more of the light feelings. How can you do this regularly, on a regular basis? Let's go to the next slide. Now, here are a bunch of different ways. If you're like, Michelle, I'm not sure which practices to start with, here are some ideas. Again, some of these ideas may resonate and some of them may not, and that's okay. You get to decide what works best for you and how you want to show up as the best version of yourself. So, of course, writing, journaling your feelings and thoughts, again, doing self check-ins to take care of that part of you. If writing isn't your thing, I strongly recommend just using your voice memo app and talking into your voice memo. Because journaling does not just have to be writing things down, it can be drawing, it can be making a list, it can be just brainstorming, letting whatever comes up, getting it out, or it could just be talking into, a voice memo. You're going for a walk, you've got your headphones in, you got your mask on. If you need to release some thoughts, feel free to do that. That's still part of the practice, okay? Engaging in some type of physical activity. I want to add a physical activity that you enjoy or that makes you feel proud. Everybody doesn't like a formal workout. Again, that's something else very connected to mainstream culture. White culture is a very particular way of working out. And I like to say, who says? Because there's nothing wrong with putting on a good playlist, okay, and dancing. If that feels good for you, do what feels good for you or what helps you feel proud. Expand what it means for you to get that physical movement in and taking care of your body that way. We're still doing our virtual experiences. So if you still want to, having a virtual coffee date, a virtual tea date, still connecting with folks virtually is still incredibly important. So again, summits just like this are so important for us in terms of mental health and beyond. So continue to connect with folks in those social ways if that feels good for you. And then express yourself creatively. Is there anything you like to make, create that feels good for you? Do you like singing? Do you want to create a new dance? Do you love painting? What about plants? Do you love putting bouquets together? Do you like writing poems, writing songs, writing stories? Do you like to put together things in terms of pottery? Is anybody else's hair a space for creativity? Because I've been trying with, we got some protective styling going on, some low manipulation styles. Come on, natural folks, right? How can you express? Can you do it through your dress? What do you like to do to express yourself creatively? Creativity is such an incredible part of taking care of yourself. And we have so many ways to be creative. So pick your favorite ones, and do what feels right for you. This one can't be said enough. Schedule some time for yourself. I like to say, busy people don't have time. Mothers don't have time to just randomly practice self-care, spontaneously practice self-care. No. Self-care in this essence must be done in a planful and scheduled way. And we're not saying anything extravagant, but it's like, okay, if the time between 12:30 and 1 is the time that I can have, it's the nap time for the kids, and I know I can get some food and put my feet up. That's self-care. That's self-care. So strongly recommend, if you can, schedule or plan for time for yourself. Similar to that, right, is trying some guided meditation or deep breathing. And I like to say for moms, if your kids are able, if you're noticing you're having trouble with the meditation, tell the kids to come be a part of it. My favorite one to do with kids, especially, has to do with like stuffed animals. So everybody's laying on the floor if that feels comfortable for everyone. Have your kids lay on the floor too and have them put one of the animals on their belly. The goal for the kids is, can you make that animal go really, really high? And then can you make that animal go really, really low? Your children will be deep breathing with you as they're doing this exercise. And you only have to do it for a couple minutes. We know attention spans are short, okay? But that can be a way. All right, is everybody ready to do some breathing together? Come on, y'all, let's do some breathing. And what I've noticed too is a lot of kids, they want to have their own self-care ideas too. They want to have their own opportunities to go, you know what, mommy, I need to go and have a minute of breathing. I was having a tough day. It's like, oh my God, children are practicing self-care. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So trying some of that, or trying a guided meditation if that feels good for you too. And these are things you can find on streaming services, YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of different ideas out there. So try one that works best for you. If you haven't tried it before, try it. See if you like it. If you don't like it, what didn't you like about it? This is truly a self-exploration process to see which practices work best for you. And y'all, you know we talking about this. Asking for help. And this has been talked about a lot today. A lot, but that's only because it's important. If you have an opportunity to have help with childcare, with chores, with delegating tasks, planning tasks, automating tasks, come on, somebody. If there's a way for you to receive help, I want you to give yourself permission to put your Superwoman cape down, because we need to do that sometimes. Sometimes we didn't even put the cape on ourselves, okay? But recognize when that Superwoman cape is on it. Do I want to take this off? Do I want to give myself some time and some space? Do I want to tap into my vulnerability with someone who's safe and who I trust to help me with the task? Yeah. If that's hard for you, trust me, you are not alone. You're not alone. Because again, there's some type of rhetoric that says we can't ask for help. And it's like, where did that come from? And how do we let it go? We need help. We need community. And especially if you have folks in your life who are just waiting. I like to say they in double Dutch mode. They've just been waiting for you to give them permission to help you. Go ahead and do it. I see some wonderful ideas in the chat too. If you're able, if your budget allows, getting a cleaning service, even if it's just once a month. Folks are talking about releasing anger, engaging in fashion. Oh, I love that. Fashion as a way to express creativity. Yes. And if you can, and I want to be so mindful with getting kids involved, if you don't have help with kids, and childcare options are limited, yes, invite your kids to be a part of it. Let it be a new activity in the house. Yes, okay. There's so many different ways, so many different ways. That's why the biggest things I want y'all to take with you is doing what feels right for you and just starting somewhere and doing that consistently. That's what we're talking about. So there's a lot of ideas, a lot of ideas. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Let's create some space to talk together about self-care and what that looks like for you. What are some self-care practices you're thinking about or concepts about self-care that you have questions about? Let's create this space for questions. Again, seeing some wonderful ideas in the chat, y'all. Delegating housework is coming up quite a bit. If your budget allows, if you can afford it, if you can find somebody and that works for you, feels safe for your family, can you delegate cleaning, lawn work? Absolutely. Laundry? Absolutely. Groceries? Yeah. I'm seeing some other practices, taking a long and warm shower. Absolutely. Does anybody do the eucalyptus bouquets in their shower? I've done it a couple times and I liked it. Oh, wonderful idea from Elizabeth. She says, one thing that can work is trading childcare with friends, and take a walk and you watch my littles and then switching it off. I love that community approach. Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna throw this out here as folks are getting their questions. Oh, here's a great question from Joanna. So it's hubby and I have different work schedules, even working from home, and our main time together is in the evening, but that's when I want to do my self-care. How can I manage doing consistent self-care with quality time with the hubby? Does anybody else have that issue or have that same concern? Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the best approach to that is just trying your absolute best to split the time, you know? And because I know sometimes after work, we're feeling really tired, we have a lot to do, but I wonder if that works for you and hubby's schedule, if that first 30 minutes or first hour after work is just for yourself. Is just for yourself. Maybe y'all can take turns with it of just having an hour or whatever time works best for you, just for yourself, and then reconnecting with him and the family. It's what works for you. I would try and split the time. I would try and split the time because I know it's a limited amount of time. But even just having 30 minutes to yourself, in a space that's good for your home, for you to have some time just for your self care can be really helpful. Try to split the time. And even if you can't do it every day, it's like, okay, Wednesdays and Fridays, I have my self care after the kids go to bed. Creating that if that works for you. I see some folks in the chat are talking about this as well. Yes, taking a shower and having your mantras and sometimes having music, turning on some 90s R&B music, having a dance party. That's one of my favorites too, okay? Just play the house party soundtrack. I'm ready to go, okay? Setting aside 30 minutes in between dinner and bedtime is such a great idea, right? Because that's a crucial time, but a consistent time. Yeah. Having a spa night with bath bombs is fantastic. Having some candles and Kim playing in the background. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Having a dance party with the little ones to any song that isn't Sesame Street, self-care. Okay. Driving home in complete silence and breathing. Can we spend a second on if you have a personal vehicle, how that can be a space for self-care? Absolutely. I like to emphasize having some opportunities for privacy as a parent is self-care. Some opportunities because I know it's hard to get, okay? It's like I'm in the bathroom. What's happening here? Okay, I thought I closed the door. If there's any ways that you can just have a few moments to yourself, that can be self-care too. If it's just being in your car alone, somebody's watching your kids, if it's just being on the other side of a door with the door closed, that can be helpful too. Yeah. These are some wonderful ideas. Music therapy. I'll share this one too for folks who love music. I love creating mood playlists. So creating a playlist of songs based around particular feelings. Are there certain songs that you like that have to do with anger and you want to validate that anger? Create a playlist of it. Are there songs that really connect you to joy as soon as you hear them? Create that playlist. Let these songs, music is a part of our cultural identity. So let's allow music to intentionally help us in terms of our emotional and mental health care. And my favorite one, if you notice you're feeling some of the heavier feelings and you want to feel the light ones, but you want to validate your experience, create a mood playlist that starts with heavy feelings, maybe feelings that kind of bring about sadness or anger. Crescendo that mood playlist to the happy, joyful, balanced feeling songs. I strongly recommend it as a self-care practice, for sure. All right, Shayna says, do you recommend including children in your self-care routine when they are 2 and under? If so, how can you include them? Excellent question, and I know somebody else had that question in mind. So when I come back to that definition of self-care, it's doing what you need to do to show up as your best self while we live in through a pandemic. So honestly, it's whatever resources and options you have. Ideally, if you recharge best by having some time away from your kids, if there's an opportunity for you to do that, go for it. Go for it. But if there isn't an opportunity to do that, if you're with your children most of the time, definitely include your children on some of your self-care practices, for sure. If it's just deep breathing while holding your baby, that is self-care, especially for 2 and under. But it really means on what works best for you. And I have a feeling, I'm going to make a big assumption. You need some time away from your children, some time. And I'll throw this in there too, especially for any moms who are kind of watching and they're like, I feel kind of bad. I feel kind of guilty separating myself from my kids, especially when they're of a certain age. I want you to take a second and think about the different roles that you hold in your life outside of motherhood. Who are you outside of being a mom? And how can you take care of those parts of you? I have a feeling, and I'm just guessing, it's just an assumption that you are more than a mom. You are a mom, and that's an important part of your life, but you also have other roles in your life. So I would take a second to explore that and see, okay, well, what can I do to take care of the part of me that's a friend, or the part of me that's a painter, or the part of me that's a dancer? I don't know. It's up to you to explore that, but that's something else to think about too. Yeah, excellent questions. Are there any other questions before we begin to close together, everyone? Yes, we got some good songs playing in here too. Come on, bust the windows out your car. That's a good song that, you know, talks about some important feelings. Okay. Yes. Yes. So it sounds like some of the biggest pieces we're taking today, you've got to do what feels best for you in terms of self-care. There are a lot of components of self-care that are very mainstream, very white centered, that don't align with our needs. And it's okay if you have different needs in terms of taking care of yourself. That's okay. Self-care is doing your best to show up as your best self and doing the things that help you get there. So if that means taking some time to explore, that's okay. I'm gonna do a really quick plug. If anybody needs help with that, I have a journal for that. It's on Amazon. It's called Self Explore, Self Restore. And literally throughout this journal, you'll receive journaling prompts that talk specifically about ways that you can take care of yourself. So you don't have to do all the heavy lifting. We are a community, okay? This journal is available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com. Y'all are welcome to stay connected with me. I'm on social media at the G Michelle with 2 L's on Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. And feel free to sign up for my newsletter where we're talking about the things that we need to take care of ourselves. That is exactly why I created the space that I created, because we need it. Black women need it, Black mothers need it, and we deserve it. Okay. So I'm so excited to close this incredible summit. Thank you so much to the PSI team. This was incredible. Thank you all so much.